Hello, in this lecture we will start a comprehensive problem which will work a service company and it will add subsidiary ledgers. And these subsidiary ledgers will help us to track both accounts receivable and accounts payable. We're going to enter the information into this Excel worksheet. I do recommend working problems and looking at problems and seeing problems that do relate to Excel because it can really help to see how things are related and it can help with the Excel skills overall. The information for this problem will be on the left-hand side. We're going to enter that information into the blue areas. We're going to, in this case, the general journal will be here. Then we're going to scroll over here and put that information into the general ledger. Now, obviously, this is a fairly long spreadsheet, can be fairly intimidating looking, but as we go, we'll take it one step at a time, and breaking down these longer spreadsheets into its parts can be very helpful. It's also very helpful to see the entire spreadsheet because we can see all the parts as we go through it. So we'll maneuver around here and see how these pieces fit together in the comprehensive problem. We can see here that we have the trial balance on this side. It's going to be in order. Assets are represented in green. Liabilities will be orange. Then we have the equity, which will be the blue. And then the income statement, which is a different blue. And it's still blue, but it's different because the income statement is related to the equity here. We can see that in the trial balance, in the accounting equation up top, where we see the assets are going to be here. We can see that the liabilities are going to be all these accounts, and we can see the equity here. So we'll be able to see our equations be in balance both ways as we go. We'll be able to see that we have green zeros right there. If that turns red or non-green, then that means we're out of balance, and we're going to have to find what the problem is. Same will be true down here. We'll have green zeros. That should always be in balance, and as we go. And then we have the general ledger. So this is the general ledger, this entire set of accounts. It can be quite intimidating looking, but all it is a list of accounts that are basically going to back up the trial balance accounts. So we have cash, we've got accounts receivable, we've got accounts receivable. It's going to be in the same order in that fashion as we go through the entire thing where we got all the assets. And then we got the orange accounts, which are representing liabilities. Then we've got the lighter blue accounts, which are the equity accounts, and the income statement accounts, which are the darker blue because they are kind of part of equity. And the darker accounts include, the income statement accounts include revenue type accounts. All the other accounts are going to be expense type accounts. So generally there's going to be a lot of expenses, but they all act in a similar fashion. All right, so let's just start recording some entries. We'll learn how to do this through repetition. The one thing we want to set up before we do this is I want to clear out some of this data entry section. So all this blue section here represents areas where we will enter data. I want to hide these cells for now so that we can only see one set of data to enter next to the trial balance. Then we'll open these up as we go so that we can manage our spreadsheet as efficiently as possible. So first thing we would like to do is put our cursor on this F. I know it's very thin right there, so you don't want it looking like that. You want it looking like that. So I'm going to left click on it. When you see that arrow drop down, so I highlight the entire column, we're going to drag over then. So I'm going to highlight over to O in this case. So we're going to stop at O, F2O, let go. Going to right click on this selected area. We're going to right click there and say hide. So we want to hide that area. And if we do that, they didn't disappear. We didn't delete the area. We can still see it says A, B, C, D, E, P. And so it's out of, and the P doesn't go. So there's some rows that are in there. We can unhide them. We will later just highlight from E to Q, let go, and unhide. And we'll see those cells when we need those cells. So now we can see the information. We're just going to take it one date at a time. We're going to record these one transaction at a time and work through this problem as we go. Once we're completed all of these, then we'll go to the adjusting process, then we'll go and create the financial statements, and then we'll do the closing process on separate tabs. One other thing I want to point out here that we haven't looked at yet, under these accounts we're going to see the subsidiary ledgers. So this is not the general ledger, this is a subsidiary ledger. This is going to be a new ledger. Why do we have these down here? These will back up the accounts receivable and accounts payable accounts. So if we look at the trial balance here, we can see that the accounts receivable, that represents the money owed to the company. It will be backed up by a GL account just like every other account, but the GL account is only in order by date. And we also want to see it in order by who owes us money. So that's going to be down here. We're going to have to reorder that data, same data that will be in the GL, but we're also going to track it in terms of who owes us money. In an electronic system, this would happen automatically. It's really good practice to do it by hand in this kind of format so that we can understand how to do the electronic system and how it works, so we can figure out what is going on, similar to doing math so that we understand how the algebra works, so that when the calculator does something, we know what the calculator is doing, and when it does something wrong, we can kind of reason what the calculator is thinking. So we're going to go down here. Accounts payable is the same way. That represents money we owe to somebody, and of course that will be backed up by the general ledger, but the general ledger will be in order by date, and we want to see it in terms of who do we owe? Who do we owe the money to? And that's going to be down here once again, and we're going to call those vendors. So these are vendors, people we owe money to. That will add up to the same amount on the trial balance. We're just going to put that same data down here as we hit that. We'll take that one step at a time, and we'll see that as we go, so don't worry about that too much. So here we go. On 7-1, we have the first transaction. Owner deposits money into the business account. So the owner took money from their personal account, put it into the business account. We're always going to go through this set of questions. I highly recommend going through a similar set of questions so you avoid some normal pitfalls that people have when they start thinking through accounts. And then once you have got the routine down through repetition, then start thinking through it. You can create whatever system you want to think about this stuff. So first question, is cash affected? Cash is going to be affected most of the time. That's why we're going to ask it first. Or it's going to be affected more times than any other account, and we're going to know how to use cash more quickly for that reason. So is cash affected? Yeah, we put money into the checking account. Did cash go up or down? It's going up because we put money into the checking account. And then how do we make something? Well, then the question is, what type of account is cash? Well, it's a debit account, and debits usually have, it's a asset account, and asset accounts usually have debit balances. We can't see that here yet because this trial balance will be represented with debits having unbracketed numbers and credits having bracketed numbers. So we will be able to see that once the trial balance has been populated. But for now, we're going to say, yeah, assets have debit balances. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it as what it is, which in this case would be a debit. So we're going to copy that. I'm going to put the cash on top because we need to increase the cash. And so I'm going to right click. Going to paste it 1, 2, 3. Going to paste it 1, 2, 3, just the values. If you paste it this way, you're going to change the format of the cell. I'm going to try to keep the values the same, so just have the words in there. We could just type in the words as well, but it's probably faster to copy and paste. Now I'm going to put this 3000 into that cell. I'm not going to type any comma, not going to type any formatting, just going to type in 3000. And then when we hit enter, we'll see the formatting will apply. Notice also that we are now in the cell and we're not on the cell. And you can see that by the fact that all the stuff is grayed out up here. We have no options. So there's a difference between once we're working within the cell and typing in it and being on the cell. So if I hit enter, now we're out of the cell and we can see that it'll format for us with that comma in there. All right, so most of these accounts are only going to have 2 accounts affected, and we know that every account has to have at least 2 accounts. Every transaction has to have at least 2 accounts, and every transaction has to have an equal number of debits and credits. Therefore, if there's a debit of 3,000, we're going to have a credit equal to 3,000. We in this worksheet are going to represent all the credits with a negative number. That's not because credits are negative or bad or anything like that, but it will help us to simplify the posting within the Excel in the most efficient way. So I'm going to represent a negative 3,000. I'm not going to put any commas in there, any formatting, and then when we hit enter, it'll put brackets around it. Why did it put brackets around it? Because that's the format of the cell. If you want to see the format of the cell, you can go to right click and you can format cells, and then you can take a look at what type of formatting is that. We currently have no decimals and we are having brackets for negative numbers. I'm going to select OK. So now the only question is, what should that account be? What will the other account be? And who put it in there? The owner put it in there. So that's going to be in the equity section. I'm going to say the owner is going to be the capital. So the capital account represents the one owner, in this case it's the sole proprietor. And we already know we're going to credit it because we debited cash. And if we think through it now, we'd say, well, does that make sense? Well, capital has a credit balance, which we'll see later once we start populating the capital account. And we need it to go up because we owe the owner more money. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it, which in this case would be a credit. So that does make sense. I'm going to right click. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that in cell C6, right click, paste it 1, 2, 3, just the values. So here's the journal entry. We could type all this in there, but it should look exactly like this. And now we're going to post this. I'm going to post this using journal entry. This is called the general journal. This is the journal entry. Now we're going to post the journal entry to the general ledger. So the general ledger is this long thing over here. Remember, this whole thing is the general ledger. I'm going to make our size in the taskbar a little bit smaller so we can see more of the screen at the same time. I'm going to bring it down to about 70. And so now we can see the journal entry and the screen. And I'm going to post cash first. So here's cash here. Here it is on the trial balance. It's the first account. Here it is on the GL. Here's the GL. It's the first account on the GL. So here's the debits and the credits. We do have 2 columns represented on the general ledger. We're just going to go to the first blank blue cell and post the first transaction and just record them in order as we go in this fashion. So I'm in cell T9. So we're in cell T9. I'm just going to select equals and point to that 3000, and that'll put D5 in it. When we hit enter, what's going to happen? This cell will go up by 3000. It'll also automatically update over here on the trial balance, put us out of balance here, here, and here. So let's say enter. So now we have the 3000 in that account. It's also here in the trial balance. We're out of balance. Why? Because in this format, we're showing that the debits minus the credits will equal 0, meaning the debits equal the credits. In this format, notice we don't have the T. We're representing it with the debits being positive and the credits being negative. Why would we do that? Because it really limits the number of columns that we're going to need later on and helps with the calculations. So that will be represented in that way in a lot of types of software, so it's good to take a look at that as we go. We're going to record the other side now. It's going to be capital. So here's the capital account. Here's the capital account here. It's right in the middle. It's the first blue account. So if we look for the blue accounts over here, we see the blue account. And we want to be in the credit side this time because we are crediting capital. So I am in cell AK17. And in that cell, I'm going to select equals. And I'm going to take our mouse and point to that 3000 credit. When we hit enter, that equals E6 will turn to 3000 credit. And that'll be a credit here. Now, Excel sees that as a negative number. We see that as going up in the credit direction because we're talking debits and credits on this worksheet. We can see that 3000 here. We can see it here in the capital count. And we can see that we are now back in blue zeros. Why do we have blue zeros? Because that's adding up this 3000 minus this 3000, meaning the debit minus the credit equals 0, meaning that the debits equal the credits. We can also see our accounting equations in balance, meaning assets here, all the green accounts, equal all the liabilities, orange accounts, equal all the equity accounts. And this would make sense. I'm going to drag that equity account. It should include it here. This will make sense because now we're thinking the company owns assets of 3000 and they owe that asset to the owner. That's all that's happened. No income has been generated. All right, next transaction. We are now on the second 7-1. Going to make this a bit larger again. Let's go back up to the 100 and scroll over. This is the taskbar. I highly recommend taking a look at it. If you do use the taskbar and scroll down and you start getting dollar signs here or number signs, that's because the cell is too small. So you can open the cell up and work with the cell in different sizes. So we borrowed from the bank 8,000. So now we borrowed money. Same set of questions. Is cash affected? Yeah, we borrowed money. So is cash going up or, well, is cash an asset, liability, owner's equity? It's an asset account. Does it have a debit or credit balance? It has a debit because it does not have brackets around it. So we can see that in the trial balance now. And we need to make it go up. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it as what it is. This is a debit. Therefore, to make it go up, we will debit it. So I'm going to copy the cash. I'm going to go over here to C8, right click and paste it 1, 2, 3. Again, not the formatting, just the values. And there we have that. The amount, 8,000. So I'm going to put that 8,000 in the debit side, no comma or anything, 8,000. Then we need to hit enter. And when we could do that, we could see that we format the cell. If we debit something, we will need to credit something for the same amount. We will represent the credits with a negative 8,000 for purposes of formatting this worksheet. When we hit enter, we'll see the brackets, we'll see the comma. All right, so now the only question is, what will that credit be? Well, if we borrowed money, that means we have to pay it back. That's going to be a liability type of account. Here's our liabilities in orange. And That sounds like it's a note payable rather than accounts payable, which will be in a normal business transaction when we buy stuff like inventory. So this is going to be a note. We already know we're going to